I basically positioned myself as like unemployable. Like if I don't take the first step, where would I ever get? For me, that then was always, right, I need to find the right coffee. Secondary, how do we get protein into this that's heat stable?
Whenever I've cooked or did anything protein powder, it's never worked. So I just gave up. In terms of patents, though, they are so expensive.
Yeah, and essentially she sent me this 20-page document of this like patent filing, and she was like, oh, you can read this if you want. And I looked at it, I was like, I don't know what I'm reading here if I do this.
I would have thought bringing anything like that into Australia, they'd run away.
Yeah, probably. They'll just turn it away just as it lands, probably.
They're bloody customs. It's like, really?
Then they just turn away everything. So £7 million in sales in like year 3.
Wow, shit.
Don't get me wrong, that is total like bullshit.
Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Josh with us. Josh, you just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself.
Hey guys, I am Josh Skillman, for anyone that cares about my surname. I'm the founder of Pro Brew, so we are one of the first protein coffees on the market, or bringing to market. So we are indistinguishable from a regular coffee and just trying to grow and scale, basically.
I'm actually buzzing for this conversation, one, because it brings in two of my favourite things. So I'm actually buzzing. First things first, I always like to get an idea of the person I'm interviewing. So can you tell us a bit about you and how this whole journey started?
So I guess we'll go back to my background. So I've had a bit of a varied background. So I went to university, did sports therapy, went and did like that for a couple of years while doing like PT as well. Kind of decided it wasn't for me and I wanted something different, and got into the e-commerce space. So like online platform sales, mainly through like Amazon, eBay, this, that and the other. Kind of played around in that space for a while, then still realized I wanted something for myself. And yeah, it kind of led me down this journey. Kind of we're 6 years in right now, from 2019. And yeah, like I love my training, I love my nutrition, I love all things like fitness coming from that, and I respect anyone that's in the space as well. So yeah, I hope that's a kind of a brief overview without waffling too much.
Yeah. What was it like in working in e-commerce and working sort of in that space, and what has it taught you that you've now brought to ProBrew?
So, I mean, it's massively changed every year. Every couple of years, e-commerce just changes like so quickly, especially with the introduction of Amazon. Like, we think that Amazon's only been around for really sort of 9-10 years, kind of like solidly at the level that we know. So my introduction to that was it's probably like 2017, 2018, where it was still like kind of growing, but it wasn't as like competitive as it is now. So it kind of just taught me about the scalability of like product-based businesses and how you can just turn like one little simple product into selling thousands of units a day. So my experience was essentially with electronic like products. Wasn't really my interest, but I wanted to learn the e-com industry. And I saw like we launched like one iteration of like a charging cable, and then 1 week we were selling like 10 a week, and then with the right kind of levers pulled, you could be selling 1,000 in a week, or you start scaling up from there. It just kind of gives me that insight into like the product kind of scalability of things, as long as the supply chain is solid. So that's kind of like my experience with it. That's like top level. Obviously, it's mainly through like Amazon and eBay that I kind of cut my teeth, as you would want to say. So,
is there anything that you obviously? I'd imagine there's bit that you now use in ProBrew and everything you do there as well.
To be honest, no. Like I've been because of my background with Amazon. Like I've been very much like, I know there's a platform there, but for me, Amazon is great when you want to scale a product, but brands on Amazon aren't strong. you will tend to go onto
Yeah.
Amazon and find what's great rated. So like 4 stars
Yeah.
plus. You
Yeah.
literally, you see it in your head. You go 4 stars plus. Give me it next day. So then you'll kind of like probably scroll on that first page and then you go, okay, that looks cool from the pictures. Like scroll a couple of pictures and go, yeah, add to basket, cool, done. So like there's no like real transaction between you and the company. It's just the product. So again, product scaling is incredible, but there's no like brand loyalty.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of looked at that. If you can build a brand that people are loyal to, you can then really scale outside of Amazon, because Amazon does also incorporate loads of fees for sellers. So like, you know, if you wanted to sell whatever it is, they're going to charge you half of essentially what you're selling it for. So if you can, in my head, if you can own that customer relationship, like obviously driving them to your website, you know, is a different story, but I wanted to grow something bigger than just an Amazon-based brand. So I haven't actually gone into Amazon. Everything I've learned has been learning off the back of myself, essentially, and help along the way.
So where did the idea of ProBrew come from? Like where did that epiphany moment happen?
So going back to, for me, like I've always been interested in my nutrition, and with that comes the element of like you need to hit X grams of protein, which I'm sure anyone interested in their fitness knows about. And you know, I found myself heavily relying on like sweet protein products and just protein supplements that I wasn't enjoying. And I kind of was like thinking one day, so okay, what do I do on a daily that I can get protein into? And I was like, oh, I drink coffee. Why has this not been done? Then kind of went on a little journey going, oh, okay, like these brands have tried it, they've not, they've got it horrendously wrong. Oh, okay, I understand. I mean, I started to understand what other companies have tried to do in the space. That's kind of where the idea was formed, essentially.
What about like developing it? Because I think a lot of the time we often have ideas, but then going down the route of like, okay, I've got this idea, but where the hell do I start in developing it? Particularly with something like a supplement or anything like that. I wouldn't even know where to start. I would be like, wait, where am I going?
Honestly, I was probably in the same boat, but I had this thought in my head, is like, if I don't take the first step, where would I ever get? So the first step for me was going and buying those other competitor products to figure out, well, not even to that point to figure it out. I was just like, oh, like, let's try these. And then
what are they like?
And then the full development started to come, because I started to understand what they'd done, or how they'd done it wrong, or how it wasn't really a substitute. It was kind of like, so at that time there was protein products that were calling themselves protein coffees, but I can't even remember the names of them. They tasted horrendous. So for me, I flipped the idea on its head. I was like, if we can create a great tasting coffee that you wouldn't know that there's protein in it, whereas all these other products that had come before was protein first, coffee second. And for me, that then was always, right, I need to find the right coffee that's going to nail this. And then secondary, how do we get protein into this that's firstly heat stable, which I can explain if you want me to. So whey protein, because of the milk that they use and the ingredients and essentially the manufacturing process, it becomes unstable under heat. So if anyone has tried to make their own protein coffee before using whey protein, you'll put it straight into the mug and it will curdle. Most likely it will curdle. You're kind of nodding your head there.
Been there. Whenever I've cooked or did anything protein powder, it's never worked. So I just gave up.
Yeah, precisely. So for me, then that was like, okay, well, what protein source can we use where it won't curdle?
Yeah.
Um, Almost like, I guess you call it like first principle thinking. Like, how do I
Yep.
solve this problem? In my head, anyway. I played around with so many different like protein I guess like protein, like unflavored protein powders,
Yep.
and just played around for like kind of months. Again, it's just figuring out what this was all in my own kitchen. I like just every day there was like a different kind of unflavored protein arriving. That yeah.
Wow. Was it literally like you're coming into your kitchen and going, right, were you making like fresh batches of coffee as well, mixing that in, or were you messing with instants? Or
so it was mainly instant. So I was kind of drinking like instants at the time anyway, because it was just like, oh, quick, cool, get that done.
Yep.
I had like a cafetiere and a ground coffee. So yeah, it was literally just these protein powders arriving. I was kind of like, I did try it in ground as well.
Yeah.
But it was always about what protein can I use that would be basically unflavored, like untraceable in that coffee. So no matter what it was, it was it was trial and error. Honestly, just trial and error at that point.
So when did you end up with, okay, we think this is good? How long did that process take?
God, right. Well, I only think now. So I think the version that we created in 2022,
Yep.
We've enhanced the recipe a little bit since then. But the version that we created then was probably when I've gone, right. Like that's nailed. Like it's got protein in. You won't know it's in there. Like it's a great coffee. Like we did all trial and error. Before that, I'll give you a quick summary. We went to a manufacturer's. We spent 4 hours doing like a research, like a new product development.
Yep.
We landed on a recipe that I thought was great. It was actually like vegan based as well.
Yep.
And then when we started kind of negotiating with them in terms of like units and pricing and all of that, that was another headache. Essentially, we landed with a product that we hadn't developed, and it was a £10,000 mistake. So I'd spent £10,000 on stock that I hadn't developed, but they thought was good.
Right.
So yeah, egg on my face. And then kind of roll that forward after sort of COVID. Kind of played around again in like my kitchen, trying to figure out what's worked. And 2022 is when we did like a soft launch of the product. We kind of did loads of tests, and we produced a really small batch of like 500 units and got it sold within like 4 months.
That's crazy. And then also, because we were speaking before we started recording about like people never really showcased the like nitty gritty part of actually developing something like this. So where did you start looking for like suppliers and stuff when you wanted to go, right, okay, this is what we got to do next? How did you start that?
That was interesting. So Google was like honestly the first place, right? Everyone goes to Google.
Yep.
But just trawling through like Google, going like, okay, like who are they? What do they do? And all of that all of that, and then kind of like leaving emails and trying to call them, and you eventually figure out that, especially in the supplements, like if you haven't got serious or what's seen as serious like interest, they're not that interested in talking to you.
Yeah.
That's kind of like on the manufacturing side, but because I was very specific about the coffee that I wanted to use, we found that probably the most challenging at the start was sourcing. We essentially it's like a Colombian micro ground, so it's like a really fine powder. And I was like dead certain on that. I was like, I found the winner. Nothing else will come up. So just to try and find that first batch of coffee, that took me nearly 6 months of like backwards and forwards with like different suppliers. And yeah, ended up with a supplier that wasn't able to scale the product. They'd bought it from somewhere, and I bought it from them. So yeah, then that led me back to essentially the biggest European distributor of coffee, and
Whoa.
there's only one factory that produces this specific coffee, like in Colombia. So
Jesus, that must have been so much of a whirlwind, but also so much of a headache. Of like, I would have got my impatient brain would have been like, it's taken me 6 months to get here, and now I've got to go back. Are you having a laugh?
yeah, honestly, it was basically that. It was wanted to run the head first into a wall and not know my name. But I kind of figured again, like I've taken the first step. I've done all of this work. It's almost like kind of an arrogance of, I don't want it to be for nothing. Like, I'm going to keep going. Like,
yeah. At this point, you've started, so you might as well finish.
Yeah, literally. That's what I'm thinking every day. So, still thinking that.
What about in terms of like, because the supplement industries are very competitive. There's a lot going on. Everyone's developing new stuff. Was there ever any anxiety diving into that space? I know you did a lot of market research before you started the journey, but I'm thinking even me being quite into my fitness, I know there are so many companies I've seen come, go, stay. Was that ever a thought that crossed your mind?
It's crossing my mind right now, to be honest. So, yeah, you're right. You always see nutrition companies pop up, supplement companies pop up, and then kind of do something and then disappear. It's essentially, especially in the UK, because there is only a hand, I think, from the last time I looked, there's only around 8 or 9 companies in the UK that actually can produce supplements for you. And if you have something proprietary that no one else is doing, if you don't have agreements in place, they will tend to kind of not steal that, but they'll go, okay, we'll use that, and we'll give it to other people. Now, yeah, I still do have reservations about us, but I've gone about it like, we're not a supplement company. First and foremost, we are we are positioning ourselves as a coffee brand. So, and because I was so specific about the coffee.
Yeah. Obviously, is there as much, because like I know from people that have started protein brands and things like that in the past, is there as much like legality to work around with in making sure the right things are in it and so on and so forth? Is this the same? Obviously, you're dealing with both, so you've got that side and then you've got the coffee side as well. Is there as much in this space?
So there is obviously UK regulations in terms of like food safety. So most factories obviously adhere to that anyway. So that's kind of like your base level, like legality. But and I'm talking from our perspective, it's always been, how do we protect what we've done and what we've created, essentially. So aside from that like, you've obviously then got all of like your certificates that you need to kind of conform with, like, you halal, like depending on what ingredients you use. You've got like certificates of like food standard safety. There's countless ones. So the legality there, you have to conform with that, especially in like where you're storing product as well, where you're handling it. But luckily, we're not classed as a manufacturer right now. So luckily we don't fall into like a lot of the legalities. We just have to do our due diligence on the manufacturer that we use. So they will hopefully have all the correct certificates in place. Now, if that changes in the future where we manufacture, like, I'll jump through those hoops. But
what about in terms of knowing that? Because obviously, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you're going into this space, you've developed it, but you've never been in the space before. And someone goes, oh, by the way, you need all these certificates. I'd be like, wait, what? What do you mean certificates?
Yeah, there's been a few that have come through. We had we had a food officer come around. There's your local authority will have like food officers, and he essentially came over one day and was like, "Oh, you're doing this. Oh, do you know that you require X, Y, and Z?" I'm like,
Nope.
no. And he was like, "Okay, like I'll give you like I can see that you're not doing anything dangerous, but you need to go and get these in places." So
Yep.
it's nice to know on that aspect they weren't trying to trip you up and
Yep.
kind of, but they are like, look, you need to go and get these things in place. So again, it was kind of going like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I just kind of trust that people are going to be doing the right things anyway, and I just kind of say yes to those right things.
Was there anything like in that space where that really threw you a curveball in terms of how you did things, how the product worked and everything else? Or is it all kind of just been sort of making sure everything's in place?
Yeah, so there has been a big curveball actually. So when we initially did like a test manufacturing, we realized that we needed to produce the product under certain conditions. This is just from my perspective. This was like a curveball that was thrown in, which then led us down the path of like protecting the product even more. So we actually have a patent pending over our product right now.
Wow.
Which is unheard of really in like the kind of food protein space, because essentially they're all just based upon recipes.
Yep.
But because of the coffee that we use and the particular protein and the protein blend, there was a reaction happening between the coffee and the protein element. So we had to mitigate a lot of like atmospheric conditions for that not to happen, which was quite interesting.
Okay.
And then that's what's allowed us to put the patent in place.
How did that get highlighted? That if you do this, then this won't happen. If you don't do this, then this will happen.
So that was actually a test run that we did. It basically a lot of moisture got into one of our batches, like our test batches, and we kind of unpackaged it one day, and we're like, oh wow, like something's gone wrong here. Yeah. And then we look back to kind of the conditions that we had it done, like manufactured under, and we're like, oh wait, like okay, because it was like all of these conditions outside, so indoors it meant all of these conditions. So yeah, that it was again like trial and error, but it was kind of a good one, really, a good one that was kind of thrown our way to highlight that we do have a way to kind of get this patent, the patent in, which was...
In terms of patents, though, I know from friends and family talking about it and trying to get one, they are so expensive.
Yeah.
And also there are so many hoops you have to jump through. How has that journey been? Because I've had that discussions with products that I'm working on and things I'm working on, like, oh, do we look at patents? And I just like... It's just such a big commitment. And while I completely see the benefit of, obviously, then you've got the patent and you've got that sort of level of security, but it's such a huge commitment and there's so much that goes into it.
Yeah. To be perfectly honest, like I knew that was one thing I could not tackle by myself. I think I got put in contact with an IP kind of consultant. Yep. So they sat with me, like she was incredible at the time. So like she sat with me for like 3 or 4 hours. I was just trying to explain everything that we did, like what it kind of led to, the outcomes, like all the ingredients that we used. And essentially she sent me this 20-page document of this like patent filing, and she was like, oh, you can read this if you want. And I looked at it, I was like, I don't know what I'm reading here if I do this, but I kind of lent on her, and she just assured me, as was like, look, everything that we spoke about is in here. Now, that was just the filing part for it. Yep. So you basically file, so it's like an application, and then that's like the first stage. So that's your like 20 million pages of pure like whatever it is. And then the next stage is you get like a report back to say what patents are in this space, or why your patent probably might not be granted. Now that filing is a couple of £1,000 just to even put that in.
Wow.
Because that's then like the time of the person that you use, because I just wouldn't even want anyone to try and do that themselves. And then like obviously that filing application, there's the sort of twofold cost there. So then when you have all that back, you then will essentially lean on your like patent officer or consultant or whoever it is, to then tell you, right, this is all that's been found, this is what we can do, and this is how we then go back to file it again. And then again, that's another supplementary cost to that. And then you can then at that point decide, right, I want to just file it in the UK, or I want UK and EU, or whichever country, and each country has its own filing price to put in.
That's crazy. And I'm guessing as well, that's also is it something, this is a very naive question, is it something you can tack on at the time that you need it? Or is it a case of you got to commit and just go for it?
So some countries have a very similar filing systems in terms of your patent. And so like the UK and EU are very similar, just because we all conform to like those food regulations. Sorry, not food regulations, like just EU law regulations essentially. And then the US is similar, but it needs extra work doing. Australia is similar to like the US.
I would have thought bringing anything like that into Australia, they'd run away.
Yeah, probably. I would just turn it away just as it lands, probably.
Their bloody customs is like, really?
Yeah, they are. If you've ever watched Nothing to Declare, then they just turn away everything. So you can file. So in my head, we've gone for UK, EU, and US, and looking at Australia. But that's like for me, that's like top markets in the space. But each one carries its own like unique filing system. So as I said, each one needs its own filing done for it. So
crazy. And then I'm sorry, Josh, we're going proper into the weeds, but because of the conversation we had when we started, I was like, actually, it's so true. No one really dives into like what's involved with going this far into starting a company and actually getting it to this point. Obviously, there's been a lot of investment into it and a lot of like things you've had to pay for and things you've had to source and so on. How have you managed all that? Because like I'm listening to you going, shit in hell. The amount of money you must have sunk into this before you're like, and you're still hyperventilating in the corner.
Trust me, I've lost a lot of sleep with it. So personally, I'm going to be honest. Like I'm a blank canvas. I tell this to people, that anyone that I meet, I've probably invested around £70,000 of my own money.
Wow.
So that's been through like I've kind of like I've been relatively lucky in a sense with like inheritance. So a lot of it's been that. A lot of it's obviously like I've worked as well, and kind of just sunk money back into that. There's also a lot of debt that's gone into that as well. So it's been a big outlay. And parts of me is thinking, I mentioned about that £10,000 I wasted. Like I kick myself because of that, but it's also £10,000 that I've learned from as well.
Yeah, lessons to learn that you probably wouldn't have got if not.
Yeah, basically.
What about like, and again, this is quite a personal question.
No,
but I think
no.
For anyone starting a business or working on it, it's one of those things that's a bit of a catch-22. What about managing something like investing into your business, but then also managing day-to-day life stuff? I'm thinking like your partner wants to move out, this, that, the other, trying to manage all that while also doing that always feels a bit like, I can't spin both plates.
Yeah, it's not both. There's about 20 plates you need to spin, isn't it? So Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, to be honest. It so I've kind of been full time on this basically since essentially for the last like 8-9 months now. So,
Hmm.
but that's without paying myself. That is literally just because we did a lot of events last year. We then on the back of that we've kind of like built a lot of traction, and the
Yep.
business then needs to be serviced kind of like day to day to do that. Caused a lot of like arguments in my like personal life with family and partners, etc. But for, for me, this is going to sound quite bad, and I've been very kind of like single-minded in terms of I know what I want to do, and I obviously like appreciate anyone that comes on and helps me, but I as I said, like it was an arrogance of like I've started this now, like I want to see it
Yep.
through. But yeah, it's very like a personal level. It's been very difficult. You see a lot of like people that you kind of grown up with go on to do like other things, like kind of in their lives, and like you're happy for them. But there's me in as you said in that corner, kind of like smacking my head against the wall because I'm trying to build something that's like not normal.
Yep. Does it ever cross your mind of like that whole thing of like wishing you didn't go down the path, or you very much like, yeah,
Oh God, that's a tough question. I think if I let myself go, oh, I wish this never happened, part of me would want to give up. um, but no, don't get me wrong. You always have self doubt. Like whatever you do, whether
yeah,
that's business or in the gym, like in fitness or just in like day to day life, there's always that self doubt. But I think you have to look and rely upon yourself to know that you you're doing what you want to do in terms of like you want to like do something better.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
No,
Sorry,
yeah,
like
completely. It's that whole
yeah.
thing of like it's that because I was having a conversation, funny enough, with a career coach the other day,
Oh,
and
nice.
basically we were chatting about the whole debate of whether you go self-employed or whether you go employed, and it's that whole thing of there's no right or wrong answer. It's just what better suits what you want to do.
Yeah.
And also your risk appetite. Clearly, Josh has got a high
Yeah.
risk appetite.
Yeah, I think again that's caused a lot of arguments in my family because I'm just so like risk on, and like everyone around me is like risk adverse. So
Right.
they all look at me.
I was going to ask what the conversations were like with family members and
Yeah.
partners and everyone sort of involved, because it's very much, I think, from my experience, there's an element of like everyone's really supportive in the beginning bit because
Yeah.
it's not that it's not that serious,
Yeah.
and then when you start getting really serious, it's like, oh, it's a big risk.
Yeah, no, literally. This is exactly it. Like, because I obviously started playing around with the idea when I was employed,
Yeah.
and messed around with it then. But as soon as you take that risk to go, right, I need to push this further, everyone's like, oh, are you sure you're making the right decision? And yeah, it's again, it goes down to like, I know what I can see the future for this and
Yeah.
like our brand and product. And I understand that you don't see it that way. Um, and like I know everyone around you, they just want the best for you. They just want you to be happy and healthy. But again, that risk is like, I want to risk.
Yeah.
I want to build. I want to push this and see what happens.
I think it's really hard because it's that whole thing of understanding both sides. And also for me, I'm very much like, I overanalyze everything. So I'm very much like, shit, like make sure we got plan B, plan C, plan D, we're going all the way through. Whereas, and that's often an approach that I take that doesn't necessarily help me because then I get stuck in a loop.
Yeah.
But then I think when you've got a big risk appetite and you're going, shit, I'm just going to go for it. Depending on the people around you, they're going to go, wait, what? Why? But then how did you rationalize that in your head in terms of the self-doubt and the imposter syndrome, particularly when you transitioned from employed to working on Pro Brew full time,
Yeah.
how did that thought process materialize?
Um, it's been more of a need, to be honest. Like, um, yeah, it's been more of a need. In my head, it was always like this is, if I don't push on this now, like I'll never push on it. Like, especially because we created traction, and
Yep.
yeah, it was just always that need. Like I basically have positioned myself as like unemployable. Like, in a weird way, because, like, long story short, I was working for another business, and there was all of these things that I wanted to change and I wanted to do, but it wasn't my business.
Yep.
And then I found myself sitting there getting frustrated, and then more and more thinking about like ProBrew, and I was like, I'm not a good employee. Because
Fair enough. I mean, fair play to you for having this sort of self awareness that realizes like this isn't helping me or them. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what about obviously we've spoken a little bit about the money and the time that you've put into the business, but we were chatting before that you're now starting to look at investments and bringing other people on board and bringing investment in. What has that journey been like? Because again, I think it's one of those areas where you get very high level information and everyone starts thinking Dragon's Den and that's about the strength of their knowledge. How did that journey start? Where did you start looking and how did the conversations come about?
So I'm actually only at the start of looking for external investment. So that's it is just a bonkers place to be. Yeah, everyone thinks, oh, you need investment, you should go on Dragon's Den. But like real life investment is nothing like that. Now, as I said, I'm only at the start. We're looking for investment.
Yep.
So if any listeners are out there, like, hit me up on LinkedIn. We'll have a chat. Yeah, so it's honestly like it's a world that I can't even explain. There's so many people out there that like either want to help you in like a good way. They want to help you. They want to see you succeed, or they're like do not understand the market, but I can't I
They
can't even
want to be
explain it.
involved.
Yeah, they want to be. They know it's there. They want to be involved. But you're talking through like figures and pitch decks, so like decks that you'll send out to potential investors, and you've essentially got to sell your vision. At this stage, you have to sell your vision. Like, you can't just solely rely on the traction that you've got. You have to sell, right, this is the big picture, like this is the market size, this is what it looks like in the UK, this is what we think realistically we can go and achieve in year 1, year 2, year 3. And off the back of that, you then need to produce it's called like financial forecasts that tell you what you're going to go and spend, what your like your revenue is, like what your sales are, how much you're going to go spend on like marketing. Then you've got the other bits and pieces to that, like where you've got cash flow forecasts, where you literally have to. I'm currently accounting for every like £1 that's coming in and out.
Ouch.
That's an interesting one. That's one I've kind of had the most backwards and forwards with. Is just that one. I've got 2 other calls just with people just to try and help with the finances, because you're producing figures that are just bonkers. And like, for example, like one forecast that we did, we make £7 million in sales in like year 3.
Wow,
And
shit.
like,
Okay. Yeah.
But don't get me wrong, that is total like bullshit.
Yeah.
But then you'll have people around you that that have gone through investment rounds, that have gone, look, I think you can do that. Like, embrace the bullshit basically in this aspect. And then as I said, the pitch deck is got to be like put in such a way where, and they're called high net worth individuals, that will look at that and go, oh, cool, that sounds like a good idea. I'll invest X into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
I can imagine the imposter syndrome in this space is strong.
yeah, massively. Any level of this, like we were sitting in a marketing strategy meeting on Monday that that we essentially sat there like, what are we doing here? We're talking to this person that she's, she owns her own company now in Birmingham that they basically like run all your marketing for you as like a food and beverage company.
Yeah.
So they've worked with the likes of like Huel, Manny Life, the creators, which I actually know. I know Max personally, who's one of the founders, creators. But they've worked with all these like huge food and beverage brands, and she's sitting there going like, "I love this. Like, I would invest in this like tomorrow." And I know this person, this person, this person. They'd be super interested. If like you give me your pitch deck and your financials, I'll send it off to them, and I have no doubt that you will have X offers on the table. Like, she wasn't even like bullshitting. She was like deadly serious. Of like, she loved it. She could see the use case scenario for it, and she's worked with all these massive companies. And yeah, that was probably the most imposter syndrome I've felt, like sitting there going like, okay, like I didn't expect.
Too good to be true.
Yeah, is it too good to be true? Yeah.
It is. I mean, as well, I wonder, because this is something I've thought myself, is how much is there another element of you that's concerned about that, like control element of ProBrew? When you start looking at investors, stuff like that, then you start possibly talking percentages and everything else. Is that something that's crossed your mind? Because it's something that I've often thought about when we get to that stage of going, right, okay, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I did when I first come into it and started thinking, I was like, oh, I don't want to give away this. Like, why would I do that? But it all goes then to the legality of what you give an investor. For example, like let's say you give them 10% of your company, but they won't be like a director of your company. They won't have any hearsay. They just want to know like, okay, like, yeah, like projections, like how you doing? Like if there's anything I can do for you, kind of let me know. They're kind of there as like your background kind of. Again, it depends on the investor. Some investors want to just give you cash and like kind of just watch it from afar. Some want to come and get involved, and they want to be with you and like help you on your journey. So it's all to do with that. But someone said this to me like a few years ago when I started like first really pushing on it. Like 10% of nothing is nothing. But 10% of like 200 million is 20 million.
Yeah. So I think the way I thought about it was like, you can only take it so far.
Yeah.
So it's only if you're looking at it from a monetary point of view, you can only get it to a certain size before you can't hold it anymore. So you're gonna have to bring someone else in.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. Like. And it's just about knowing that you're doing the right thing. You essentially, you build this thing by yourself and you go, oh, I want to keep hold of it. But then I think as you grow, you realize that, okay, like I need people around me now. Like I need to let go of these things because it's now too big for me to just own all of it. And obviously there is like other scenarios where that happens, but the more money you raise, obviously, the more equity you give away in the company. But the bigger the chunk of that pie, the bigger the pie is.
It's honestly, it's one of those things that I sit there and just going, if when we get to this point, I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah. But how do you start? Like, because again, I think whenever people think of investment, they think of the traditional routes of like Dragon's Den, or they might go down the route of crowdfunding. If you're looking for direct investment from individuals, where do you start? Because like, how do you start? Like, are we talking the old cliche that everyone says, just drop people messages on LinkedIn? Oh yeah, that's how that works.
So that is one strategy. Like there is people out there that their whole like career is investing. And that's been one I haven't explored that strategy. I'm kind of like trying to lean into my network of people at the moment.
Yeah.
So I feel uncomfortable just completely DMing someone, but the chances are with the people that you know, especially if you're in a space where you've kind of positioned yourself and you've got traction, the people you know can open other doors for you just from
Yeah.
people that you meet and chat to. So I tried to never like underestimate a conversation that I've had with anybody.
It's a great way to think, because it's
Yeah.
often it's like that. I think it's like all it takes is one person to know someone,
Yeah.
and then you're off and running.
Yeah, precisely.
What's been the biggest challenge with Pro Brew? Like, what's been something that you think that was really hard to get over?
I thought it was trying to find the coffee. I thought that was the biggest challenge. But no, now it is literally this investor challenge.
Yeah.
I As I said to you, I think before we came on air, it is just another world, and just nothing can prepare you for it. And it is such a mind-boggling place, especially if you've never worked in any finances
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
It is a big challenge, like, and it's probably the biggest hurdle I think at this stage we will overcome.
Has anyone like obviously you're on the start of the journey? Have you spoke to many people to sort of give you a feel of like what the journey might look like? Because I think that's often the fear of the unknown is probably the biggest thing, because you sit there and go, what are they going to ask for next? And someone's going to ask you for something, and you're like, I haven't got that one. I have to come back to you on that one.
That is definitely a fear. Yeah, yeah. I couldn't give you an answer really. It, it's definitely fearing what's coming around the corner. But the more you scale, the quicker I think just you run. Like
Run before it catches
yeah,
you.
yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's kind of one person I spoke to the other day was just like, you will essentially the more money you bring on board, the more fuel you're adding to your fire, and the bigger the fire will grow. And you've essentially it's not like even you're trying to firefight it because you want that fire to grow. You've just got to then almost
channel it.
Channel it and hold on for dear life.
Yeah.
And just try to not lose your head and lose your shit.
I mean, that's probably the biggest challenge. But what advice would you give to someone that's if I said to you, right, Josh, I'm gonna put you back at the beginning where you're starting to get traction. What advice would you give? Because I think a lot of people want to start their own companies, but it's that whole thing of the fear of the unknown. And I think as well, it's that, again, the thing of knowing what you want to do and why you want to do it.
What advice would I give? Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think it would be don't ever doubt yourself.
That's a big claim.
No, I know. Like you will always doubt yourself in any form anyway. But I think if you really have a vision and you really want to do something, like chasing that dream is far more rewarding for you than just letting it pass you by.
Yep.
Simon Squibb, I'm sure everyone has seen him on TikTok, on social media. He's always talking about that. He's always talking about like, what's your dream? Like what does it take to make it happen? But he's dead right. His message is like spot on. Like you will never feel more fulfilled like chasing something you really want to do in your dream than you will just sitting and now and watching it go by.
I think it's that, and I think the other thing as well is that whole thing of being caught up in what everyone else is doing. Like you said at the beginning of the episode, that you look at friends and you look at people doing stuff, and you think, and then I'm doing this, but then it's that catch-22 of you can't do both very often.
Yeah, like I've sacrificed like a lot with like friends, and like there's part of me that regrets that, you know, like I've sacrificed like weekends, you know, seeing like my friends that I kind of grew up with, or like, you know, sacrifice like not going out to meals with them because we've got to prep for like the next day an event, but there is like a massive part of me that wishes that hadn't have happened. But then I also look at it to go, well, going back to what I said a minute ago, like I've been chasing my dream. Like I'm happy for them. Like I hope they're happy for me too. But yeah, I'm chasing my dream in the direction that I want to go.
And then what about talking of dreams, what about where do you see Pro Brew going, and like where do you want it to go?
Wow. Left field question. No. So immediate future would be establishing ourselves fully in the UK. We want to push into like retail, so supermarkets, Holland & Barrett's, things like that. The runway isn't very, very clear, but I would love to go over to the US. I would love to see like Pro Brew in the US and see what happens over there. And yeah, I obviously mentioned to you like Australia and then the UAE. Never can get that one right. I'd love, because their health fitness scene out there is like crazy. They love coffee as well.
Yep.
You know,
do you think with that though? Do you think you're going to have to? Because I'm thinking like every country has their own like palate. So I'm thinking like the Americans, they love sweet shit. Yeah. The Asians, they love sweet shit. We're kind of in the middle. The Aussies do their own thing. How do you like? How are you? I imagine, I don't know whether you've thought about this, but how are you going to navigate that? Because the flavor profile might need to be different.
Yeah, you'd spot on there. Actually, I didn't kind of assess it that way. But no, Colombian coffee and the taste profile of it is quite. It's essentially one of the liked ones all around the world, wherever you go.
Yeah.
So we're quite set on that. Obviously, we can introduce like different flavors to the range, which are planned. So, you know, you can produce like sweet and like cinnamons, caramels, like
out come the Christmas specials.
Yeah, literally, yeah. And all that sort of stuff. And yeah, if we have to go back to the drawing board in terms of like if a certain country doesn't like the taste profile, I'm sure that would be on the table, but you know, that's like way down the line. It's way down the line. So yeah, but overall, like the vision is to push into retail, to push it into these like bigger countries. But yeah, like first of all, like UK first, establish ourselves like fully. So.
But lastly, I need to ask you the last question I ask every guest, which is what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
Top of my head is the him, her, them
pronouns,
the BS that brings along with that.
We got controversial here.
Yeah, I mean, it was like seeing it on like social media, and then that kind of that irks me a little bit. But then having to tailor what you say now because you're potentially unsure of someone's gender, and I understand it, but I hate it.
Yeah, I was having a similar conversation with a friend the other day, saying it's that as someone who has got friends that use different pronouns, it's one of those things that's, if you're not in the space, it can often feel like you're kind of outside it, don't quite fully understand it, kind of in this realm of like, I don't want to be offensive, but then I also like, because the other thing I pointed out to my friend who's also use different pronouns is, as a dyslexic person, complete fucking curveball. It's one of the things that I understand it, and my point of view is always the same of like, at the end of the day, if someone wants to be identified by different pronouns, it makes no difference to you. So if it makes the interaction between you and another individual simpler and easier and more comfortable for both individuals, do your best to use it. And that's kind of my approach. And then also my caveat to that is, as long as the communication channels are open in terms of we're still learning about it and getting used to using it in our vocabulary. So the shooting someone down for using the wrong pronouns or misgendering in a conversation, as long as you apologize, I think it's one of those things.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've had it where like I have been corrected, I have apologized, but to me it wasn't clear at that point, and it was like, oh, that's like the first kind of interaction I've had like that. It's, for me, I kind of approach it as like I want to treat everyone fairly and equally anyway. And I'm never going out to offend anybody, like, ever. And I just want to treat everyone kind of with respect and love, essentially, as a human being, one human being to another, right?
Yeah. It's a complete minefield. I think it's like, obviously coming from very much like a disability background, it's very much the same thing that Not Quite Pod was, Not Quite Politically Correct, Not Quite Pod was built on, of like, just deal with people with a little bit of grace. Like the amount of people I've had come up to me and go, you're, yes, Darren, I'm in a wheelchair. You can say it. It's allowed. It's fine. I'm not going to bite your head off. But it's just, again, keeping that communication channel open, because people don't know what they don't know. Like there's the debate in the disability community of like, oh, but I shouldn't have to explain my disability to everyone. And I'm like, yes, but also people don't know what they don't know. So if someone comes up to you and that you're the first disabled person they've met, they're going to ask questions because that's the way it works. And it's a really tricky thing. It's the same thing of like, just give people benefit of the doubt. I think you've always got to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that sentiment, like, entirely. Like, we're not all bad people.
No. And also, it's also, don't get wrapped up too much in the detail of like, I say we're all human, allow people to make mistakes. I think that's always, it's been my sort of catchphrase, is like, the amount of people that still use handicapped, and it's a very American thing. And I'm like, well, you sound like my granddad. Like, Jesus. But it's so true. I think, just give people the benefit of the doubt. But thank you so much for coming on, Josh. It's been an amazing conversation. I think I've really enjoyed as well diving into the weeds of like a growing company. And thank you for sort of being so honest and so open with it. Because as I say, oftentimes we get the highlights. We don't get the nitty-gritty.
You don't get the lowlights. That's what it is. You don't get the lowlights. No, honestly, no, it's been awesome. This is my first podcast ever. So I really appreciate you kind of bringing me on. I'm always happy to be like open and honest. I said to you before we started that I just try to be open and honest. Like, if anyone wants to ask me any questions about what I've done, the business, investment, whatever it is, like, I'm happy to like talk to somebody. Like,
awesome. And obviously we'll link Josh below and we'll link Pro Brew below in case you want to check either out or ask any questions. And just thanks again for coming on.
No problem, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.